HOA tried taking my farm. It's military training land. I never thought in my life that a simple piece of land could turn into a battlefield of rules, power, and pride. This is not just about dirt, fences, and barns. This is about freedom, about standing tall, and about the right to protect what is yours. And today, I want to tell you the story of how an HOA, yes, a homeowners association, tried to take away my farm. But what they did not know was that this farm was more than just property. It was land that had been used for something far greater than they could ever understand. It was military training ground. The first time I got that letter in the mail, I felt a deep sting in my chest. The HOA demanded that I bring my property up to community standards. Community standards? I laughed, but not with joy. This wasn't some neat little suburban yard with trimmed grass and white fences. This was farmland, land that had carried sweat, tears, and sacrifice, land that once echoed with the sound of marching boots and shouted commands. I remember holding that letter in my hands, and my mind started racing. Who were they to tell me what I could or couldn't do here? Did they even know the history? Did they even care? This wasn't just a house on a street corner. This was sacred ground, a place where young men and women trained to serve, to protect, to fight for a nation that gives us the very freedoms these HOA bullies were now trying to strip away. The arrogance in their tone cut deeper than the paper itself. They spoke like rulers, like kings over land they had never bled for. Remove unapproved structures. Limit farming activities. Maintain uniform appearance. Those words made my blood boil, because every unapproved structure was built with purpose. Every farming activity was part of my family's legacy. And appearance? Uniform? How can you make a battlefield uniform? How can you strip the scars from land that has seen both discipline and sacrifice? As I stood there, holding that notice, I felt anger rise. But beneath that anger, there was pride, because they didn't know what they were up against. They didn't know the truth of this farm. They didn't know that beneath this soil lay stories of courage, of discipline, of honor. This was not just farmland. It was training ground for warriors. And then I asked myself, what happens when people with no understanding of sacrifice try to dictate to those who live by it? That's when I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about showing them and everyone else that some things are not for sale, not for control, and not for bending to shallow rules. So I began my fight. And let me tell you, this fight was not easy. The HOA came at me with legal threats, with meetings full of polished words, and with neighbors who whispered like I was the problem. But I knew the truth. I knew this wasn't about messy lawns or old barns. This was about power, about control, and they picked the wrong person to fight. Do you know what it feels like when people try to erase your history? It's like they take a knife to your memories, scraping away everything you and your family stood for. My grandfather used to tell me stories about this land. He said, "This soil holds footsteps of the brave. Don't ever let anyone tell you it's just dirt." And those words echoed in my heart as I sat in those HOA meetings, listening to their empty demands. They wanted compliance. I wanted freedom. They wanted control. I wanted respect. They wanted silence. I wanted the truth to roar louder than their polished reports. Every time they tried to push me down, I came back stronger. When they fined me, I didn't pay. When they sent inspectors, I showed them the training records, the maps, the history that made this place untouchable. Do you think they cared? No. They rolled their eyes, they scoffed, and they said, "Rules are rules." But rules without honor are chains. And I was not about to be chained on land that trained heroes. There were nights I sat alone on the porch, staring out at the fields. The wind carried memories, whispers of soldiers who once ran drills across the open ground. I could almost hear the echo of boots striking dirt, the sharp calls of discipline, the unity of people preparing for something greater than themselves. That's when I realized this land wasn't just mine to protect. It belonged to everyone who believed in service, in sacrifice, in freedom. The more the HOA pushed, the more I dug my heels in. And every pushback revealed something powerful. They didn't expect resistance. They thought fear would silence me. They thought fines would break me. They thought isolation would weaken me. But they forgot one thing. This land had already been through battles far harder than their paperwork. And so had I. Let me tell you something powerful. When you fight for something real, fear loses its grip. I was no longer scared of them. I was no longer worried about what neighbors thought. I was locked in, focused, determined. They wanted to crush me with rules, but I had something they couldn't touch. History, sacrifice, and will forge in steel. And slowly word spread. People started to notice. Veterans came to stand with me. Neighbors who once whispered started asking questions. They wanted to know why the HOA was targeting me so hard. And when they heard the truth, many of them stood by me. Because when you stand for something bigger than yourself, you awaken the hearts of others. The HOA didn't like that. They doubled down. More fines, more threats, more meetings. But every move they made only showed their greed and their blindness. Because the more they tried to erase the truth, the louder that truth became. And that's the lesson here, my friend. When you are right, when your heart is in line with honor, no amount of pressure can silence you. Yes, it will hurt. Yes, it will get lonely. Yes, people will doubt you. But in the end, truth doesn't bow to lies, and freedom doesn't crumble under control. So I kept fighting. And in this fight, I found something I didn't expect. Strength I didn't know I had. Every rejection fueled me. Every threat sharpened me. Every attempt to break me became a step to build me. And with each step, I realized this wasn't just about saving my farm. It was about reminding people that freedom is worth fighting for, even on the smallest piece of land. This is where the story begins to shift. Because as my fight grew louder, others started bringing their stories. Stories of HOAs abusing power. Stories of people being crushed under rules that stripped them of joy, of peace, of dignity. And suddenly, I realized this wasn't just about my farm. It was about a bigger fight. A fight for people everywhere who are tired of being controlled by those who never earned the right to lead. And here's where I'll leave you for now, because this story is only halfway told. The battles ahead are tougher, louder, and more brutal. And trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. Backhand index pointing right. If you've ever felt crushed by unfair rules, if you've ever had someone try to erase your history, if you believe that freedom is worth standing up for, then stay with me. The next chapter will show you what happens when truth collides with power, and when courage refuses to back down. The storm did not pass. The HOA kept coming, harder and louder than before. They thought they could wear me down with paperwork, with meetings, with endless threats. But what they didn't understand was this. The more they attacked, the stronger my roots grew. And just like the soil beneath my farm, I was unshaken. Every week, a new letter showed up. More fines, more warnings, more demands. They wanted me to tear down my barns, my fences, even my flagpole. My flagpole, the very pole that flew the American flag, the same flag soldiers once saluted on this very ground. That was the moment I knew they weren't just attacking me. They were attacking everything this land stood for. I remember standing out there one morning, the sun rising over the fields, the flag waving gently in the breeze. And I thought, this is bigger than me. This is about everyone who has ever shed blood for this flag. Everyone who has ever trained here. Everyone who has ever believed in freedom. I wasn't just defending dirt. I was defending history. The HOA board didn't care about history. They cared about power. They sat in their polished chairs inside their clean offices, speaking with words that dripped of arrogance. Compliance, regulation, standards. Those were their weapons. But mine were stronger. Mine were honor, truth, and a history that ran deeper than their ink could ever reach. When they called another meeting, I showed up with more than just myself. I brought veterans, men and women who had trained on land like mine. They stood tall, their presence shaking the room. Some wore their old uniforms, their medals gleaming under the dull lights. And when they spoke, the room grew silent. Do you even know what this land means? One veteran asked the board. Do you understand the sacrifice behind it? His voice cracked, heavy with emotion, but strong enough to pierce every heart in that room. The board shuffled papers, avoided eye contact, but the message had already been delivered. The truth was too powerful to ignore. That day, something shifted. People in the community who had once seen me as a stubborn farmer began to see me as a fighter for something real. Neighbors came up to me in the grocery store whispering, "Stay strong." Others left notes at my gate saying, "We stand with you." And I realized when one person refuses to bow, others find courage to rise. But let me be clear, the fight wasn't over. The HOA doubled down. They hired lawyers. They filed complaints. They tried to drag me into court. They wanted to bury me in legal fees, to crush me under the weight of their system. And for a moment, I felt the fear. I sat at my kitchen table with stacks of papers, wondering how much longer I could fight. Then I looked out the window. I saw the fields, the barns, the flagpole. And I remember my grandfather's words. "This soil holds footsteps of the brave. Don't ever let anyone tell you it's just dirt." That reminder lit a fire in me again. I wasn't going to let them win. Not here. Not now. So I fought back smarter. I gathered records, documents, proof of the land's military history. I connected with historians, veterans groups, and even local media. I told my story. And once the story was out, people listened. Because this wasn't just about rules. It was about respect, legacy, and freedom. Soon, the pressure turned on the HOA. Reporters started asking questions. Community members started demanding answers. Why were they attacking land with military history? Why were they trying to erase a place of sacrifice? The HOA, once so bold, now looked cornered. And here's the thing about truth. It doesn't always win quickly, but it always wins eventually. The more they pushed, the more people stood by me. The more they tried to silence me, the louder my story became. And in the end, they had no choice. They backed off. The fines disappeared. The threat stopped. The case was dropped. I had won. But this victory wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who believed in standing tall when the world tries to break you down. It belonged to every veteran who ever trained on soil like mine. It belonged to every person who has ever faced unfair power and said, "No, not today." And I'll tell you this, winning didn't make me arrogant. It made me grateful, because I saw firsthand that when you fight for something true, people will join you. Courage is contagious, and freedom is worth every sleepless night, every tear, every battle. So now when I walk across my farm, I don't just see barns and fields. I see victory. I see resilience. I see a reminder that no matter how small you feel, no matter how big the enemy looks, you can win if your heart is steady and your purpose is strong. This is what I want to leave with you today. Maybe your battle isn't against an HOA. Maybe it's against fear, doubt, or something that keeps trying to control you. Whatever it is, don't give in. Don't bow. Don't let anyone erase your history, your values, or your dreams. Because if a single farmer on a piece of military training land can stand up to a powerful HOA and win, then you can stand up to whatever tries to break you. The question is, will you? Backhand index pointing right if the story lit a fire in you. If you believe freedom and truth are worth standing for, share this message. Let others know that courage still lives, that history still matters, and that no amount of pressure can crush a heart that refuses to surrender.